If you're someone who's been drowning in all the noise and the chaos of the world and everyone else's opinions, thoughts, and commentary, then this video is definitely for you. Today, I want to talk about authenticity and how we find our way back to an authentic place, how we even know who we are at our core. Years of programming, societal influence, peers, teachers, coaches, parents, um, all of it, all of the news and um, all the things out there that take us away slowly, bit by bit, and disconnect us from our own authenticity. The things that socialize us as we grow up and as we're kids, and then even into young adulthood and later adulthood even. It's something that's really important to talk about because we do hear people talk about authenticity and how it's so important to be authentic, but so many of us don't know how we find the way back or how we even know what's authentic to us, because there's so many faces we wear, facades that we have, layers of protection, forward facing images that we put out there. And although all of those things are protective mechanisms, if you will, and they're all parts of our ego and the box that we've put ourselves in, at some point we really lose connection with who we are authentically are. And we don't really understand what the pathway back is. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I've recently had a circumstance in my life where I was confronted with this. I tend to be a pretty authentic person through years of my own internal work and healing. I've really come to understand who it is that I am at my core, but I still struggle. I have young kids, and oftentimes that's where I see it showing up a lot, is where I don't want my children to be impacted, or I want to kind of, I don't want to go along to get along, just to try and, be neutral and not necessarily speak my truth. Now, I am somebody who always speaks my truth with kindness. That's very important to me. I don't think we should be out there preaching at people. I don't think we have to draw a hard line in the sand. I don't think we have to always give our opinion on something. I think there's always a time and a place. And sometimes we have to know when it's time to stand up and convey our truth, and other times where it's more we just are able to recognize that it's not worth our time or effort to, to make a stand. Okay, because we can know who we are inside, we can know what we're all about, we can even validate other people without agreeing with them. So I think it's really important to kind of understand that aspect of things as well. But I had a recent circumstance where one of the people that lives in our neighborhood had been speaking to our neighbors about certain thoughts they had about me, about our family, making assumptions, making false claims about things that they thought were going on or not going on within our home. And one of the neighbors that I'm regularly in contact with, and that I really enjoy having a neighborly relationship with, just mentioned to me that I should probably be aware of what was going on. And my knee jerk reaction was defensiveness, was outrage. It was, I bristled. My nervous system dysregulated, because I feel like one of the things that I've really worked to embody in my authenticity is the fact that basically my whole life I have felt misunderstood in some way or underestimated. And I do have those patterns of people pleasing and fawning and, being afraid of being judged by other people or criticized by other people. because that was something in my childhood home that was very important, was kind of like how people perceived us. And so, we could be having, a very chaotic and dysfunctional dynamic internally in the home, and then the minute that we would step out in public, my parents would immediately put on a happy face and act in a certain way, and that was something that was always really hard for me, because I am a deep feeling and deep thinking individual. I have empathic tendencies. Um, and I am a highly sensitive person. And so it was just so hard for me uh, not to wear it on my face, if you will, or not to, be more emotive. But of course, I was socialized in a way where I learned how to hide those aspects of myself. And honestly, later on in my childhood, when I got into my teen years, I started using substances in order to numb and cope and to push all that down, which was obviously very unhealthy. So I really, my knee jerk reaction was of much dysregulation, and I just found myself in my head running these stories and telling this person off, and just all the things that we do when we are in that defensive stance, and when our nervous system is in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn um, state. And I have a lot of tools and I teach tools, and so I did have to take I had to step back. I had to regulate my nervous system. I had to breathe. And then I went into a meditation, or I just quieted my mind about it and really sat with it. And I am somebody who thinks that it is helpful to be very self-reflective, but we can't take everything that everybody says as our truth. So, to make a longer story short, I was able to recognize that I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to justify anything. It's not my job to worry about what somebody else is doing. And it does give me some um, insight into that individual, where anytime somebody is focusing on other people and kind of getting stepping outside of their lane and into somebody else's business, if you will, that's coming from their own wounding place. And so I really came from a place of having compassion for this person and being able to be forgiving, and then to actually allow myself to feel those very, very charged feelings, and then honestly let it go. Let it go. And it's been a couple of days since this happened, and I woke up this morning just feeling like how far I have come in reorienting myself into my own authenticity, where honestly I'm unbothered by it. Now I'm sharing it here. But I had, an intuition where I was like, this is something that happens for all of us, and it might be helpful for me to share. And so I really have come so far, because before, or in different areas of my life, I would have ruminated on this for days. I would have let it keep me in a dysregulated state. I probably would have marched over to this person's house and confronted them in some way. I would have really, like, I would have kept the energy alive. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share about authenticity, is about knowing who we are and knowing what we're all about, how we want to show up and not only relate to other people, but how we want to relate to ourselves. Because I could have gone down the rabbit hole of having a very negative internal dialogue with myself and allowing my inner voice to make me feel shame, or want to make me hide in some way, or make me show up differently in my life, where I'm more guarded, or where I am not showing up in full authenticity, because that internal part of me would have told me that there's something bad or wrong with me and that I'm in trouble. And so it's a very helpful paradigm, I guess you will, to talk about how do we get back to a more authentic and how do we kind of come home to ourselves? How do we know who we are at our core, and what we stand for? And I think some of this is a reconnection to a higher self, but I also think some of it is is an identity that we cultivate. meaning that we just consciously get to decide that these are our values. This is our compass. This is what we want to, what's important in our lives and what drives our decisions and, dictates or helps us as a roadmap for how we want to, where we want to give our energy or, the things that are important to us. I think one of the very first and most important things that we can do if we're trying to find a way back to our own authenticity is to really disconnect from the noise. And in our society and the way it is currently, with all of the stimulus that we have around us at any given moment, this can be really challenging because we're so constantly consuming and we don't even really realize it. I mean, some of us do. We know that we're consuming a lot of content and things, but we're always, anytime we're engaging with anyone outside of ourselves, we are opening ourselves to suggestion. And we are, that that information is coming into us. It's just the same as kind of what we fuel our body with or what we eat or what we consume, through our diet. It's the same way with our mind where we are consuming, what are we taking in? What are we ingesting, if you will? What are we bringing in and allowing in, not only to our minds, but also our energetic field. And since we are very suggestible, all of those things are having an impact on how we view ourselves, how we view the world, how we want to show up, how connected we are to source, or how disconnected we feel from source. So it really is important to just, the first thing to do is really to try and reduce any of that external input for a while. And this can be incredibly hard. I've gone through different periods where I've done different, media detoxes or digital detoxes or different things like that. And I'm not saying you have to go to that extreme, certainly, but I do think it's very important to be intentional on what it is you are consuming, anything you're listening to, anything you're watching, any of the sensory inputs. Those are all having an impact on how you see yourself and how you see the world. And so many of us, there's so much coming at us at all times. And then that's what it is. It makes it hard for us to kind of decipher or like sort through what belongs to us and what doesn't belong to us and what we just kind of allowed in unintentionally. And that we're seeing life from that paradigm. One of the important aspects of reconnecting with ourselves is really doing a lot of that healing work around inner child reconnection and reparenting. And although for some that sounds very woo woo and it sounds very unattainable, what we're really talking about there is that we want to reconnect to all the parts of ourselves, the fragmented parts, the parts that we have not been able to reintegrate, the parts of us that are in the shadow, if you will. And there is a lot more. There is a lot more being spoken about shadow work, and working with the shadow, and that is also very important work that goes along with inner child healing, to be sure. But we really do just have to be able to find a space of, where we slow down and we are able to listen more deeply and to be able to reconnect to that inner part of us, and the whispers of our inner knowing. A lot of people obviously call this intuition, and truly that's what it is. It's that higher consciousness information that gets so drowned out because our intuition doesn't, it whispers, and it does not, anything that feels urgent or feels very loud is always going to be ego. And that's coming from fear, shame, displeasure, all of those things. That's the ego wants to keep us in this box. And so we really have to, have a practice of stillness or a practice of, getting quiet in order to be able to strengthen the muscle of listening to and hearing our own intuition. And, that's the thing that many of us, for many years, I didn't really realize this, but, When we're talking about intuitive hits or intuitive information coming in, one of my mentors had said at one time that, your intuition, your internal, what your intuition is gonna, it's gonna sound like your voice, your own voice. That's why people can't have a hard time distinguishing, because they are like, well, is this just me in my ego, or is this my intuition? And as we practice this skill set and we learn it, then we come to understand that our own intuition speaks in our own voice. And so, we just have to learn how to, cut through all of the noise and the stories and the repetitive thoughts that do not serve us. And, the thoughts or messages that are coming in that actually would serve us. But all of this really does come back to a place of nervous system regulation. Because anytime we're in a dysregulated state, any decision or any thought or any idea that we get is coming from a place of fear and survival. And so if your body is dysregulated, you can guarantee that any information that you're getting is going to be coming not from higher self, not from intuition, but actually from ego. And so that's one of the most important skill sets that people can start with. I mean, the very first skill set is always awareness, because we actually have to be aware of ourselves to even know if we are in a dysregulated state, because many of us just walk around day to day in that state, and that is our baseline or our normal. But um, working to really calm the body and be in that rest and digest state is so important. And the more that you work on those skill sets and the more that you're in a more regulated state, and then you notice when you're not, you're going to be able to recognize it pretty quickly. But there's also physical signs and things you can look for. I always just say that anytime there is restlessness, urgency, or a lot of rapid thinking, so like a lot of rumination or a lot of repetitive thoughts, you're in a dysregulated state. Okay, because when we are in parasympathetic, we're in a state open to connection, and we're open to learning, and things slow down. It's like if you've ever been in a flow state, doing something you love, doing something creative, time just flies by. It's like your thoughts are, they're not rapid. They're slow and fluid. And so that's the type of energy that when you're in, that you're in a regulated and parasympathetic state. And we really have to get to a place of nervous system regulation and calmness in our body before we can even really recognize what it is we do want in our lives. Because so many of us are carrying around ideas about what our life should look like, or how we should be showing up in the world, that aren't necessarily authentic to ourselves. They're more geared towards what everyone else has said or told you it would be to be successful, or to have a life that is worthy or valuable, or to even have worth and value. And so it really is about being able to get yourself into a state where you can actually use your imagination, which is the creative plane, and be able to visualize what it is that you want for yourself. And truly, any desire that you have, or any thought that comes into your mind about something you'd like to do, or somebody you would love to be, or something you'd really love to have in your life, that is all coming from higher self. And so we have to trust that if the desire is there, that it is part of authentically who we are, and it is something that we can actually have or embody in our own lives. But we feel separate from it, and that's what keeps it at a distance. And anything that we're chasing, or anything that we have put in a place of, like put up on a pedestal, or anything that we believe is with outside of us or beyond our reach, we are creating that distance, and we are actually pushing it away energetically. And so we really have to work to see ourselves from a state of the possibility for us, and being in the energy of somebody who already has that in their lives, because it is available to us, because energy is neither created or destroyed, and so what we want is already available to us. We just have to learn how to align with it. and get our vibrational frequency to match it. And um, that's kind of all of the aspects of this where, we have to work on nervous system regulation. And then, we have to figure out what our desires are. And then we have to work on our programming, our subconscious programming and our limiting beliefs, and working to rewire that and reinforce what we do, in fact, want to experience. But part of that is that it has to feel safe in our body. And that's what I think the disconnect for so many of us is it doesn't feel safe in our body. Because anytime we do start to experience good things in our lives, it feels so foreign to us, that we immediately go into that fear state of, well, what if it doesn't last? Or, am I worthy of this? Or, those kinds of things that actually then take it straight back out. And the last thing I want to say about authenticity is we truly do have to, we can cultivate our desired identity. And, we can really, we can decide for ourselves, what our values are, who we want to be, how we want to show up, how we want to relate to ourselves and others, the things that we want to prioritize in our lives, the things that are important to us. And then, we show up every day aligning with that energy and living from that higher vision of ourselves and showing up as that person. Now, we're not always going to get it because we are kind of in the in between of trying to figure out, how do I be in this current reality and how do I show up as this new person? So it is a skill set, and we're not always going to get it right. But every opportunity that you're faced with is an opportunity to self-define. Like, do I want to be this old version of me who would have crumbled under this or dysregulated or had negative or limiting lack thoughts and beliefs? Or am I going to be this new version of me who is showing up in this new capacity, knowing that things always work out and that I am worthy and deserving of whatever I desire, and that I can feel any way I choose to feel in any moment? So love is available to us at any time, no matter what's happening in our life. Abundance is available to us no matter what is happening in our life. Like, as far as tapping into the feeling state of it, we can feel gratitude, we can feel love, we can feel abundance, we can really feel anything, success. We can feel anything we want in any moment. But we do have to practice that, because if we've been practicing the thoughts of lack and limitation and struggle and strife and shame and guilt, like, we've been reinforcing that. Our brains love to conserve energy. And so it's just like, of course, it's going to be that patterning that's going to show up when something happens in our life. And that's kind of what circles me back to my original story about, the events in my own life, is that, in that moment initially, yes, my nervous system definitely autonomically fired to an old story and sent me into a state of dysregulation. And because I have been working on awareness and, I've cultivated an identity, I was able to find space there and to step back and to ask myself, what version of me do I want to step into to respond to this situation? Who do I want to be in this moment? And that dictated then how I did show up. And first, I cared for myself. I cared for my nervous system. I re regulated myself. I spoke to myself with kindness and curiosity. And I did get very curious about what part of me was offended, what part of me was triggered by this. What's the part of me that's bothered in this situation? And that gave me such valuable feedback. Like, it's not an unfamiliar story to me to feel judged or criticized or to feel like I'm misunderstood or victimized in some way. But those things don't serve me. They don't serve me, and it doesn't empower me. And so, coming from that state, like, in recognizing this is an old pattern, I was actually able to, be an observer of it, step outside of it and respond differently, to be calm, to be able to recognize that's about the other person and not me, to recognize that I don't have to feed this energy. And honestly, the more you feed the energy, the more that it's going to be reinforced in your life. And I didn't resist the really uncomfortable emotions that came up and were associated with it. I was present in my body and with myself, and I let myself feel those very uncomfortable feelings, and I let them pass. It wasn't comfortable. It's not the most desirable thing many of us want to do. But the more we do it, the easier it gets and the quicker it passes. And there's such a weight lifted. Moving through that and being able to just let it go and meet myself in a place of love and kindness, it's the most amazing feeling in the world, truly, to be able to hold yourself, show up for yourself, love yourself unconditionally, and not let things bother you. It's incredibly empowering to just be like, yeah, I'm not going to give that any more energy, and I'm going to forgive that person. I'm going to send them love, and I'm going to move along my way. Doing the work of reconnecting to that part of you, that more authentic part of you, coming home to yourself, reacquainting yourself with your inner child, it's the most important work that you will do, because no one can steal your power. No one really has any power over you any longer. You know that you are your own source and that you are the one that decides always. And that is true empowerment. All right. Have a wonderful week. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.